welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. I've been wanting to talk to you on this podcast ever since I started the podcast, and this seems like the perfect opportunity for us to connect, given the exciting new project that you're launching into the world. And obviously want to have you talk a lot about data lords. But, I was thinking maybe even before we get into all of that, and not to throw you a curveball here, but I'm very curious because this does play into your music. Where does your love of birds come from? Were you always a bird lover?
Well, let's see. So yeah, it happened. It's funny. This is a story I told when I got the NEA Jazz Master thing, and I was talking about people that can change your life with doing one little act of mentorship or kindness or whatever. So when I was little, we had a bird hit our window, and it was very unusual looking, and we didn't know what it was. And there was an older man from my hometown named Mort Smith, and Mom knew he was kind of the birding guy, and so she asked him if he would come over and identify it. And it was a really unusual, wonderful bird called a black-billed cuckoo, with a long tail, quite a interesting bill on it, and we put it in a freezer bag and kept it in the freezer. And I guess he recognized that I was just really excited about this bird. And so when it came to be around Christmas time, they have these big bird counts, Audubon bird counts, where everybody in the country counts birds, and they do studies on migration and populations and loss of habitat and all sorts of things, and they use that information. And so he invited me to go on an Audubon bird count with him, and that was just like, that really, it was like, wow, this is a thing, and he was so good at identifying birds, and he was just wonderful, and that just turned me on. And if not for the fact that also in Wyndham there was this wonderful pianist, Evelyn Butler, who really ignited the music bug in me, I think there's no doubt that I would have become an ornithologist, because I had it in my head in first grade I was going to be an ornithologist. So, wow. And it still is something that I'm completely obsessed with. So, if I had more time, I would be a better birder. But I love it, and yeah, birds are central to my life.
Yeah, and given how busy you are, I think it's wonderful that you've been able to keep it up and periodically take time off to go to various places around the world and experience.
Yeah, usually when that happens, it coincides with a visit. So I went to Brazil, and one of the trips I went to in Brazil, I hired a bird guide to take me to the Pantanal for 10 days, and it was just this bird guide and me for 10 days. Just seeing as many species as we can and as we could, and it was just fabulous. And Mark and I went to the Atlantic forest on one of my trips to Brazil. So, it's really nice. See, now what you need to do is just book me in the places with wonderful birds.
That's a good point. And then now with social distancing, being outside might be the only option for a while.
Yes, yes, exactly. That's true. Yeah, outdoor concerts. People will know I'm an easy target for gigs if it's in an interesting birding place.
Well, was one of your trips to Brazil that you just mentioned one of the sources of inspiration for a concert in the garden, or was that a different part of it?
Concert in the garden. Let me think about that. Cerulean Skies. It was let's see, Concert in the Garden was the music kind of came out of Brazil.
I guess I'm thinking
so much for birding.
Or Dançado, was that inspired by something?
That was inspired more by choro music, but not birding. But birds also, I think, are such a big part too of Brazilian culture. Like right now I'm seeing a cardinal just go by the window here. Anyway, Brazilian music has been a huge influence on me, but then, birds are that aside. And maybe birds play into the sensibility of Brazilian music. I mean, certainly Jobim, Antonio Carlos Jobim, was a great birder. I mean, there's quite a history of people like that. Messiaen, was a fantastic birder, ornithologist, so yeah. yeah, I think that birds with the songs and their songs and just their beauty, you know, it can't help but inspire an artist of any kind, I think.
It's really clear in your writing that it's been a big part of it. Okay, before we get into data awards, I've heard you in previous interviews talk about your piano teacher, Evelyn.
Hmm.
What do you think about her made her so great in terms of really steering you in the right direction? Like, was there anything about her that just, as you've had so much experience now as an educator, that you think, oh, she really was good at that?
Well, it was that when she performed, and she was a great performer, when she performed, her personality came out in the music and just grabbed you. It was just the joy of making music. You know how it is. I mean, you look for artists and you're looking for artists that when they play, something grabs you, something beyond being a good musician, but there's something extraordinary. And she had that thing that just made everybody want to be a part of it. It was just alive and joyful and full of humor and fun and dance and spirit. And technically she was just unbelievable. She was like, you know, in that direction of Art Tatum. You know, she was from Chicago. And actually, I was just talking a lot to Gene Paul, who's been mastering my record, and he's the son of Les Paul. And he was talking about his father, being in Chicago for so many years. And I realized that it was, and he worked, I think, on the Jackie Gleason show. And I realized those were the same years that Mrs. Butler was in Chicago. And Chicago was an amazing scene back then. And so, you know, she only moved to my hometown because of dire circumstances where her husband and son both died, and her only living family was her daughter, who had married a chiropractor in Wyndham. So it must have been quite a blow for her she must have been really devastated to leave what she had in Chicago to come to Wyndham, you know? So I think when pretty early on after she got there, my parents had a party at the house. I heard her. I was like, that's it. I want to be Mrs. Butler. My hair was super red then. Hers was super red. And I think I think she too could feel that I loved her. And just one more ingredient she had. There was no delineation between when she played boogie woogie or stride or classical. She played all extraordinarily well. She had an equal knowledge of them all, an equal respect, and she shared them all freely. She didn't delineate between things. And I really think that's one of the reasons my music, a lot of people say, well, it's hard to categorize. Well, I had that from the beginning.
That makes total sense. That makes total sense. I mean, I always tell people personally, I think there's two types of music, good music and bad music.
Yeah.
And it's subjective. But I think it also speaks a lot to you at a young age being receptive to picking up on how much she loved music, and as you described, like her character and personality coming through the music. Not many young music students would see that right away. So, you know, that says a lot too, that you saw that right away and thought, this is infectious.
Yeah, no, I have pictures of that first night too that were taken at that party.
Wow.
And other people brought instruments and were playing, and it was the first night my parents met her too. She had just moved to Wyndham, and I'm running around in my drop seat pajamas, just not wanting to go to bed ever. So yeah.
Okay, well, I know from a recent concert I got to see you do with some of the music from Data Awards, one of the songs was inspired by your father as an engineer, a sound engineer? Not a sound engineer, a radio.
Well, he was an engineer, but he was a ham radio operator.
So I want to have you talk about that, but my short question is, so he was a ham radio operator. Was your mom a musician?
Mom played piano. Mom actually was quite good at playing Chopin, and Mom was good. She actually was a good pianist. Yeah.
So my question is just, where do you think your musicianship, love of music, all things music, kind of comes from?
Oh, Mom was playing music a lot around the house. She had a lot of classical records, She had some old kind of jazz, but not a lot.
Okay.
And they had a lot of world music. She had some music from Peru and from Brazil, you know, some old albums, you know, that were more like folk, almost world, that she picked up when they went to South America on their honeymoon.
Okay.
Yeah, but my dad, you know, he's an engineer. He invented a lot, you know, he has a lot of patents and things like that. And I think that it's a similar mind. I always thought that my dad, because he didn't do music, he had a good voice, but you know, he sounded great singing "Holy, Holy, Holy" in church. But you know, he didn't really know music. And my mom played piano quite well. But it was years later when I first made my album Evanescence. And I played my dad the cut Evanescence, and I played it for my parents. And my mother's response would usually be something, she always wished I was writing things that more people could sing in a shower. But my dad immediately hooked into the rhythm and the incessant rhythm and of the, you know, it was this kind of Tony Williams beat that was going on in that. And Dad clued into that and the connection and the motivicness of that in aspects of the writing. And I thought, wow. So
he had an ear for it. He clearly had an ear.
He had an ear and a mind for it. And it made me think that it really is about mathematical stuff. Mom is much more into history, story. Dad was more into math, geometry, relationships. He was just really brilliant that way. So, and I think music is largely about that. And so that was a wake up moment for like, what kind of mind does music come from? And I think it comes from a lot from that kind of a brain and that kind of thinking.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So, because I was just kind of curious, you know, it sounds like just between the two of them, that had a big enough influence on you, and the exposure you received through your mom's music and listening to it kind of fueled the fire, so to speak.
Yeah, and also, you know, Mom, I mean, okay, we're talking Windham is so small, you know, small town, and there's not a lot of influence there, but Mom always had instruments around, and she had played a little violin when she was young, so at some point she got a violin, and we were all teaching ourselves from the Suzuki method, and she bought a drum, a snare drum, and some brushes and a cymbal and some sticks, and we took some lessons with somebody that lived in town, and we had a whole basket full of percussion instruments, and you know, so we would have little jam sessions, you know, my mom would be on the drums, touch, touch. Well, I would play something, you know, on the piano, some old jada or something like that, you know? So it's like, the level was super, super low, but, you know, it doesn't matter. It's like, if you have the love for it, you know, and the wish for it, and then you have along the way the right guideposts and you're listening to the right things, I don't think that matters, you know?
Right.
It's about the spirit that's behind it, I think.
Well, as a new parent, I'm just so fascinated by what scenarios, or more, I should say, what environment we can create for our daughter, because she's really interested in everything right now as a 20-year-old.
You know what I would say? And I talk about this in my liner notes. The environment of blank slates. I feel like so many toys and things these days tell you how to build them, tell you how to do them, how to put it together. We had boxes full of paper and paints and scissors, and we'd go out and find rocks and use an old, you know, like a paper carton, you know, that's some, you know, like things that fruits are in and stuff. And we would use those and make paper frames and get glue and use yarn and make a lion out of some rocks and make these little, you know, sculptural thing. I mean, we had so much fun just making stuff. And to me, that's the creative mind, wherever she goes, it develops the sense of creativity, play, the ability to make something from nothing, the joy of experiencing your own mind and your own creativity, as opposed to, you know, the accomplishment of putting something together like somebody told you to. I think there's a big difference. So, I mean, I know that was a big part of my childhood from both my parents. And then,
not to cut you off, sorry, but I have to think, hearing you describe that, being able to play with a blank slate. Is there a fair comparison to how you compose and think about composing and not worrying about, do you understand what I'm trying to say? A blank sheet of paper, music sheet, right? When you compose, is there any connection between those two environments?
I think there probably is. I mean, I hate the blank sheet, you know? But this might, actually, you're touching on something. You just made me think of something I've never thought about. Yes, you might be right about that, because people have different ways of composing and different things that inspire them. So some people, like somebody to tell them, I want you to write a piece for this person, and it's for a commemoration of this event, and and it's 100 years from when this happened, and then somebody goes in and they write a piece about it. I can't stand that. I don't work that way. The way I work is that I sit there and I bumble around, and something comes up in the same way that you look at rocks and say, ooh, that's an interesting shape. That reminds me of this. And then it sort of shows you what it is, and then you help it and you make something. And that's kind of the way I compose. And then after the fact, I look at it and I say, with my music, it's like, or as I'm doing it, suddenly it reveals something that is inside of me, because I'm doing it sort of subconsciously. And then all of a sudden I realize, wow, this is reminding me of hang gliding in Brazil, or this is reminding me of, these colors remind me of birding in Central Park. And then that drives it. But the initial thing is playing, experimentation, discovery, a mind of anything can happen. And I think I work best that way. Yeah.
This is the perfect segue to start to talk about data lords. So tell me about data lords, and tell me about the conception of this being a dual album. Did that start, as you just described, playing with melodies, trying to not worry about a concept? Or, I'm trying to ask a big question, but how do we condense it down? Because now we've got the final product of this great album project. But where did it start from? And
well, it started, again, like we were just saying, from a place of not being conscious of what was going on. And I think the first piece, I'm not sure if the first, I have to look at the dates. It was Data Lords and Bluebird, I wrote them around the same time. Actually, yes. I think Data Lords literally premiered a few days before Bluebird. And they were so different, these pieces. And right. Bluebird sort of was the pre-working with David Bowie Maria. It was sort of beautiful and sort of natureful and whimsical and whatever. And something about working with David had kind of brought out the beast in me, and because of my older music that he was attracted to, and I started writing, and I felt as I was writing this piece that was coming out of that place, it reminded me of this inundation with data, by big data companies. It's kind of everybody wanting your attention, everybody grabbing, trying to get a piece of you, to build their AI or to build their money or their growth or whatever it may be. It's just this feeling of just constantly being used, and all going to the end to make something that's more intelligent than we are, that many scientists are warning is going to spin out of control and could easily turn on us and destroy us. And so as I was writing the piece, I kind of let it go to that sort of, that apocalyptic ending, and it was kind of interesting that it was for the Library of Congress, that, it deals with lots of copyright issues and things like that. And so anyway, I wrote that piece, and then I just started, it's kind of like it opened this wound that's already in me, this frustration about music and rights and what's happened to our profession in terms of financing our recordings, and the usury of creative works by big data companies, and kind of unleashing, making it possible for everybody to think somehow that it's okay to get all of that for free. And so all the things that go under that umbrella, and there's a lot of them now, started coming out in the music. But by the same token, I was still, like, you can see that bird scope in the back. I'm still birding and doing other things, you know, that were bringing out the beautiful stuff, you know, the stuff where I shut it all down and I go into that mindset that we were talking about with your daughter of, you know, just being in nature and looking at clouds and saying that shape looks like that, you know, or just whatever it is, just meditating on the sky or on the water or rocks or nature and poetry and just reconnecting to that inner part of yourself. And so I started ending up with this very divergent, what would you say, bifurcated, polarized two sets of music. And so one night, so there's a wonderful guy, Justin Freed, and he's been a participant in my records from very early on. And we've become very close friends. And he came to the Jazz Standard. He lives in Boston, and he was at the Standard. And we played a set, and he said, "You have to record this music." And I said, "I don't know how to record this music. It's so polarized, you know, it's like, it doesn't make an album." And he said, "Well, make 2 albums. And I was like, "Oh my God, I can't make 2 albums." But then I got thinking about it, and I started analyzing what was happening in my music that I wasn't conscious of. And I realized it is the inundation of the big data companies through the internet and all, and then the consciously trying to pull away from it and reconnect to all those other things, art, nature, literature, everything. And that was present in that other music. So then I consciously filled in the pieces. I wrote Sputnik. I wrote a piece called Look Up for the other side. And I realized this is 2 albums, and this is a story. And this is what so many of us are dealing with. This thing of getting lost in this world that's making us addicted and telling us what to do and affecting our mind, affecting our politics, affecting our democracies, affecting our even the wiring in our brain and the wiring in children's brains, you know, that it's pretty scary stuff. So anyway, that's how it happened. And, you know, so yeah, what is it? You know, the art sort of reveals what's going on in one's life without somebody even being aware of it.
Yeah. Well, you know, listening to the album a few times through now, I have to hope that people will cite, and when I say album, I mean both of the discs, people will cite this as one of the reasons why they have gone back to listening to albums in their entirety.
Yes, yeah.
Because it's hard to describe, but you can't listen to this work, Data Lords, both albums, without listening to both albums, without listening to the whole thing through. And
do you think so? Because I don't know, because I thought, wow, this is a tall order. You know, people might need to, you know, listen to one piece and take a nap, and then.
Well, I think knowing the narrative that it is about this duality, it kind of begs to be listened to through all the way through. And you know, whether that means a track now and a track this afternoon, but I mean, like, really trying to understand how you put it together. That was one of my first takeaways when I got to hear it in its entirety, was thinking, wow, this I hope this is the reason why people start listening to music all the way through again.
I hope people do. I mean, I'll tell you, I've spent just such an inordinate amount of time trying to get relative volumes and make things sound good in a sequence and everything. And you know, people keep saying, "Oh, nobody listens to music that way anymore." And I'm like, oh God, that's so depressing. But maybe it is the case. I don't know. I mean, I certainly do hope. Another thing is a lot of people don't read liner notes anymore, because people are so used to the streaming culture. And to me, the liner notes are just essential on this album. You know, if you just listen to this music, you'd wonder, well, why that and why that, you know? But if you read, Gene Paul said it, my mastering engineer, because I first sent, you know, the files to him. And when I started telling him what it is, he said, you have to tell people this. You should be saying this on the album as audio in between the tracks, because it makes it so much more wonderful to listen to. And I think it is important. So, you know, hopefully I've done everything I can to make this package so beautiful that people want to read it, you know?
Well, as soon as people see the album cover too, I have to think they're going to be drawn in. It's gorgeous. Can you talk just a little bit about the album cover?
Yeah, well, there's this fabulous artist, Aaron Horkey, who happens to be from my hometown. And
From Wyndham?
From Wyndham.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that? Yeah, he's from Wyndham. I went to a little, Wyndham has a historical society, and it has a little gallery. It's just kind of one room, and they have shows there. Nice things like quilters will show there, or an artist or something. And in their regular collection, they had this Aaron Horkey, and it was very, it was prairie image, like a prairie image that just felt like home to me, but then very apocalyptic at the same time. And then I started reading articles about him, and my sister had mentioned him to me, but I didn't know his work. He was younger than I was. And I started looking on the internet. If you go to Aaron Horkey, the Aaron Horkey, Horkey on Instagram, people can see his work. It's insane. The detail is unbelievable. And so I was so nervous to call him. I was like, oh God, I hope he's gonna want to do work with me on this album. And he did, you know. So then I told him, I didn't want to tell him what to do. You know, he does these birds with these helmets that I love, but I didn't want to steer him in any direction. So I just basically told him what the album was basically about, sent him a few rough mixes, and he came up with the idea himself of making a cottonwood leaf. And I recognized it immediately. Wyndham is in Cottonwood County. And so the cottonwood tree is an iconic tree for anybody from where I'm from. And for anyone from where I'm from. And then what he did with the leaf, and it's so realistic. People might think it's a photo. I hope they know that it's painted. Even with the little holes from the bugs, you know, like, I don't know why that made a noise.
That's right.
The holes from the bugs, you know, where it chews out between the veins and everything. And then he had the idea on the other side of the leaf to make the veins be computer circuitry. So it's this kind of yin and yang between nature and then the whole package opens up. And my designer, Sherry Dorr, who did the design for Thompson Fields, designed the package. And so the whole thing opens up, and there's 2 CDs, and each CD is in a pocket with more artwork by Aaron. And when it opens up, it's a 3-page, you know, thing spread by Aaron. And then there's a die cut in the center, and then the book opens up, and that's got something else. And it's beautiful. And then the photography is all by Brienne Lermit, and she did all the photography in the Thompson Fields. She came to Wyndham with me for those beautiful photos. And so she came, and this time we photographed the recording session. So I have just fabulous pictures of the guys in the band, and it's pretty nice.
Oh, wow. I mean, when I first saw the album cover, and I've only seen a picture of it on my computer, I thought I was looking at something that was 3D. Like, I thought there was depth to it, right? But it's really not.
And it is going to be, I mean, I haven't seen it yet or felt it, you know, but it's going to be, you know, the real side of the side of the leaf without the circuitry will be pushed out, you know, with debossed. Right. And then the gold circuitry is embossed. And then the Data Lords is black embossed, black on black, which is a really nice look. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. So where can people listening go to order the album now? Because we're doing this.
My website is the best place, just mariaschneider.com. And yeah, they can, you know, you can pre-order it, and then once it's out. And then the really cool thing that I love also about Artist Share is not just selling directly to people, but we do documentation of projects. So these projects have been videoed for years by Marie LeClaire, and everything from commissions I've done to past recordings. So whenever anybody buys a recording, they get access when they log in to all this other stuff. And like for this album, we're giving everybody who buys the album, even if you buy the CD, you're also going to get high-res downloads, which are extraordinary. I've become suddenly woke to the idea of high-resolution downloads, 96 resolution as opposed to 44:1, which a CD is. It's like a whole nother universe. It feels like it's me standing in front of the band. If I feel like the band is there, it's that big a difference, you know. It's
how big of a difference does it matter my audio equipment? Like, do I need good audio equipment to hear the difference?
Well, not to hear the difference. No, not to hear the difference, but to hear it to its maximum quality. Yes, a good set of headphones will do it. But the thing that you need is your computer. If you're playing those files out of your computer, you're not going to want to attach it to your computer through the headphone jack. I did that for years. I had like a little, you know, mini stereo plug that went from my headphone thing to a double RCA into back of my old style amplifier. And what you really need to do is go out the USB. New amplifiers have a way that you can plug from a USB, I don't know, it's like an AB or I forget what it's called, to go into the back of the amplifier. Okay. But old amplifiers, you have to go through like a DAC, you know, a digital audio converter, so that you're converting the digital signal into the analog. Did I say digital to audio? Digital to analog converter. So that is kind of all you need. But and right now it's hard to even get them, because with COVID, I was trying to get one when I was working on mixes, and to use this other amp I had, this old amp, and you know, Sweetwater and all those companies, they said, oh God, they're all sold out because everybody has been getting them for doing podcasts.
That doesn't surprise me. I just thought of this question, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but have you ever thought about creating a way, whether it's on your website directly or on your ArtistShare website, either or, to stream your music for some sort of participatory paid level? And here's why I'm asking that.
Stay tuned.
Sorry?
I said, stay tuned.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that.
What were you going to say?
Well, you answered my question. I'm glad to hear that. It's increasingly difficult to buy a CD player.
Yeah. and CDs, now I've learned, are not that great a sound. I mean, God, they're much better than an MP3. But if you can have high res, you know, it's like, whoa. The problem is with high res is they're really huge files. One thing I didn't say is somebody could play a high res file on their computer and plug in their headphones to their computer. But I think it's still not the same as going out a USB through a digital audio converter and then putting your headphones in your amplifier. I think, I'm no expert on this, but yeah, for me, it's the problem is, you know, with the streaming thing is so many people want the convenience of that now. Yeah. They're used to it. They've been trained into it. And convenience was, you know, the thing that was, you know, first put into play through YouTube, you know, it's like giving everybody's music away. And then, you know, okay, now Spotify is competing with YouTube, and Spotify is practically giving everybody's music away. I mean, it's like what they're charging is absurd when you compare to what somebody like me pays to make a record. You could never, with the audience size that I have, this niche music, make that money back on the, you know, through streaming on any of these platforms the way that they're run. And so I have to sell my music directly. I have to preserve my marketplace. Otherwise I'm out of business. I can't continue to throw hundreds of thousands of dollars into making records. Mm-hmm. But the streaming is, if people want that convenience of streaming. So all I would say is stay tuned, working on solutions.
Well, and I'm only also bringing that up for, I know it'll open up the audience.
Mm-hmm.
right? Because sadly, yes, the majority of people do access their music on Spotify, so they can't find your music there.
Well, so I did one thing this year, because my music was completely not on Spotify because, because of the things, this idea that everybody's music is priced the same, whether you're somebody who makes music in your bedroom or you're me that spends, hundreds of thousands making all these recordings, and we're all being given the same amount per play and we're not allowed to set our own price. This is like anti-free market, and it's really frustrating. But I did finally decide, because it became obvious that if you're not there, you don't exist except for the people that know you already. So there's no discovery of you. So I put 5 songs on Spotify with an album that is cut into 4 album covers. And I have noticed that some people have come to my site, and found, I don't know if it's from that, but there's been some people buying some downloads. It's not a huge number, right. But it just, if there's that leak there that some people are going to discover me and then go looking for it and hopefully find their way to me. It's not, it's not going to put your kid to college, let's say.
Right. Well, can I ask you, sort of shifting topics here for just a second? If I'm doing the math correctly, you've been leading your own band for 25 years, more than?
Yeah. 20, let's see, the first album was recorded in, was it 1993 or 1992? Something like that. So it's like 17, 18 years since, that very first recording. Okay.
So that in and of itself is an accomplishment. To be leading a big band for that long now. It's not something many people can say right now. Is there anything, this is sort of a 2-part question. I'm interested to hear what you've learned from that experience after all this time. And then I'm also kind of interested how you might talk about that topic or the topic of band leading to music students, if you ever have the chance to do that.
So wait, and say what the first question.
I'm just kind of curious, after having had the experience of leading your band for so many years now, what advice would you have to aspiring band leaders? That's one part of the question. And then how do you talk about the concept of band leading, if you do at all, to music students? Because a big part of what you do is residency work. And I'm just thinking about my own experience as a music student. That would have been something I would have loved to have heard someone with your experience talk about, the idea of band leading, and how do you...
Well, first of all, I think there has been, at least for me, a value in having the same players largely. I mean, there's been changes over the years and those have been important, but having a lot of the same players over time, because you develop a way of playing together, that everybody knows each other, and that enables everybody to take more chances because they know there's a level of trust with improvisatory music that gets built up. And so people get to know my music so well that they can take more risks. And if you haven't played somebody's music very long, you've got to do everything pretty much the way the composer says, otherwise it could fall apart. But once everybody really knows it internally and everybody knows like how far it can stretch or whatever, now everybody can take risks and everybody knows the boundaries and everybody has a sensibility for the aesthetic that they're going for. So that's the plus of doing this. And I talked at length with George Wein about this. Like he loves the fact that my band has been together for so long and recognizes that it's really unusual. So then the second side is like, how do you do that? And that can also create a sort of stasis too. It is important sometimes as a leader to make changes for yourself and for the music. Everybody who has a small group, has different projects that they work with. But if you're somebody like me with a band and it's completely the same forever, it is good to have it shaken up from time to time. So as a leader, those can be incredibly difficult decisions to make. They're difficult because you love these people, and you're grateful for them and they contribute so much to your music. And everybody's close. And then if you make a decision like that, it's really, really, really hard. And sometimes it means friendships are destroyed, you know, and some aren't, depending on the person and how well they deal with that. You know, I had one person, I said I wanted to make a change, and they said, that's great, you should do that. And those are the kind of things I need to do in my music too. And thank you. And if you ever want my help again, I'll be there, you know. And then there's other people that are like, they never speak to you again, you know. So, but that's the hard part, you know, of having a band. What keeps everybody together, I think, is respect. I think that is the biggest word in the music business. You know, when people respect each other, then you can be critical sometimes. I've had a couple people come up to me in the band and say, you know, Maria, you did this thing, it wasn't that cool. Maybe you didn't realize you did it, but, you know, you shouldn't do this, or da, 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 da. You know, I really appreciate when somebody comes to me with something like that and tells it to me with respect and with kindness, you know, as opposed to somebody letting it, you know, get to a certain point and they just blow up at you, you know. And so there's a huge part of this that's about just people skills and dealing with people. And I know I'm sure I've made mistakes. I've done my best. I know that, you know, if I look at the long list of people who have played my music, some on a steady basis, some for a few years, some for a few gigs, you know, wow, it's just an amazing list of people, and I'm grateful to them. But yeah, leading a band, being a leader, knowing when to lead and knowing when to give some free rein to everybody too is really important. If you're like a control freak over every aspect of the music, you don't allow them to bring to the music what they're there for as jazz musicians, you know. So I've given a little bit more freedom to musicians over the years. And I even have one thing I did with this album is I had a few little kind of workshops where I'd have a few musicians come and we would just play and experiment and throw out ideas and try things just to expand my palette of things that I might not otherwise get to with 18 people sitting there at a rehearsal. And that was really fun. So,
well, it's interesting that you mention the importance of being together for a while lends itself to being able to take risks. The music on Data Lord, specifically the music that you wrote that deals with technology and everything, it's risky sounding, it's dangerous, it's edgy, it's like, and so the few times I've had a chance to see it live, I get that. Like, I get that sense that that your band, there's a mutual level of respect from the years they've had together that's coming together to play this new music, knowing we're not really sure what's going to happen, right? Like, I'm thinking specifically about the composition you wrote that has Morse code, because just watching you direct the band, you're holding up signs for that piece.
yeah.
And I'm trying to imagine the musicians playing the music. There's a huge level of trust, not just with you as my band leader, but I'm trusting that you know where you are in this piece of music.
So this piece, it's really interesting that you bring that one up, because this is a piece that the idea for it actually came from an artist share participant who saw a picture of my home and saw there were ham radio towers and said, you should write a piece with Morse code. Morse code was the first binary language that preceded ones and zeros. It's longs and shorts. And I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant, you know? And I was around Morse code as a kid because of my dad. And so I had it in my head, I wanted to do that. I had 3 rehearsals. I pay everybody pretty well for each of those rehearsals. It's thousands of dollars to do, you know, it's more than $2,000 to rehearse. It's about $3,000 to rehearse my band. And I had 3 rehearsals trying different versions of that and failing. I felt like I failed. I didn't like it. It didn't speak to me. And I was ready to give up. And then this summer I did a gig. Do you remember when I worked with the Ronnie Scott's band in London in July? So I pull up to the hotel, and the hotel was called CQ.
Wow.
And when I saw it, and when I saw it was called CQ, I'm like, okay, I'm not giving up, because I was ready to start over and try to come up with something else, you know. And so I played around with different ideas, but the thing I will say is that I was so appreciative because the guys in the band, they didn't get like, oh, what is this thing, or you know. They were all, Maria, we know you. You're gonna figure it out. You're gonna come up with something. It's gonna be great. You know. And I was just like, oh man, don't say that. It's not gonna be great. You know. But I finally came up with something I really really like, and it's very unusual, and it is risky. And the only way we could stay together in the end was for me to hold up. You know, instead of telling them, okay, we're here. I literally had to hold up the letter A, you know, and then, you know, because there's these rehearsal letters on the different bars. So I was just holding up letters, and that's how we recorded it. And that's, if we ever play it in Carnegie Hall, I'll be holding up rehearsal letters in Carnegie Hall, because it's the only way to play this piece. And it, you know, it all finally, you know, came together. But yeah, it took, you know, thank God I'm with musicians that as they're playing something, it might not be, and I experimented, oh my God, in those rehearsals, we tried crazy things, and everybody went for it with full commitment, you know. They tried every idea. They didn't poo-poo it, none of it. And, you know, and so it was really, I'm really lucky to have that, because not every idea is going to be good. You know, not many ideas are going to be good. But if you don't have, again, and this is about even just being a musician playing in somebody's group, if you don't give them the respect to be able to fail, right? Then you miss that opportunity for that one maybe great idea that you could be a part of, you know? So I really, really appreciate them. And just one more thing on this topic of risk. This record is largely risky because of Bowie, because David, when we were working together in my apartment, you know, and I'm always scared. I'm always saying, oh, what if it doesn't work? What if people hate it? You know, oh my God, you know. And David was like, oh my God. And he said, forget that. He said, if the plane goes down, the great thing about music is everyone walks away. And so I was thinking, yeah, you know what, you know, so everybody, you know, if it isn't good, what does it matter? Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Yeah. So this album does have its fair share of risk.
Did David tell you what some of your earlier works were that influenced him, that steered him towards your music? Did you ever have that conversation?
Oh yes, yeah, that early on, the first time we met, yeah, he said he really liked Don't Be Evil, sorry, that's on the new album. Dance You Monster to My Soft Song and Wurgly. Those, especially those two pieces. I mean, he was a big fan of the band, but he liked that intense stuff, you know, that kind of edgy, dark stuff. Not really surprising.
Yeah, that makes sense. Wow. Well, I'm so glad you told some of those stories behind the, you know, behind the music, so to speak. I'm conscious of your time. I'm grateful for your time. Is there anything else we should talk about the album that we haven't covered?
Let me think, if I can think of anything about that. Maybe just the players, you know. I really do my best to try to write things that bring something special out of those players, that highlight things that I love about them, you know. And there are just so many great solos. I mean, this album has a lot of Ben Monder things, not just when he solos, but it just the things he plays, you know, behind people and alongside people. It's on CQ, there's a Donnie McCaslin solo where it's just a trio with guitar, Jonathan Blake on drums, and Donnie, and they're free to play whatever they want. They just have to get from point A to point B, you know, with seamlessness. And in between, they can go anywhere. And the listening and the level of creativity and connection between them is amazing. Marshall Gilks is featured on Look Up. He has so much agility and this beautiful sound, and he just, oh my God, that
might be one of my favorite pieces, by the way, on the whole project. Look Up.
Look Up, yeah, and he's just spectacular on it. Ryan Keverly has a trombone solo on Don't Be Evil that is just brilliant, you know, and he plays almost like these, almost, how do you call it? What's that kind of call to, it's like a, what do they call it? Like in a battlefield when there's a bugle call, kind of. It almost
almost like the trap sound.
Battle cry, kind of.
Right.
What was that?
Well, I was thinking of traps, but that's not what you're thinking of.
Well, taps is in the piece. I wrote taps into the piece.
Oh, okay.
But is it revelry or something? It's almost like that. You know, it's got that kind of aspect. It's just very, very intense. And then Steve Wilson on Stone Song. That is just what he does on that is incredible. And then it's not just him, it's the interaction between him and Gary Versace on accordion and Frank on piano and Jay on bass and again, Jonathan Blake, and just the way they communicate. So, you know, this album just has the brilliance of the performance that is, you know, is just impossible not to recognize. Just so many great solos. Greg Gisbert on CQ with his electronics. Greg, who didn't for years even have a computer, is suddenly playing electronic trumpet, and it's really great. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, it's fun. I hope people will enjoy it.
Well, I would say I wish we could end this by telling people when they can see the band immediately.
Oh God, isn't that? I just pray to God November can happen, but I will see. You know.
Yeah. But it'll happen, and in the meantime, everybody has to go to mariaschneider.com, or they can go to Artist Share. And now's the time to order the album because it's shipping soon. Congratulations!
Oh my God! Barring any like, you know, massive problem, somebody said that Mercury is finally going out of retrograde today. Hooray! Whatever that means, it's supposed to make things better.
Good. We'll take it. Well, Maria, thank you so much for talking to me today. And, you know, the album is just amazing. It's just amazing. I hope you're proud of what you've done. It's really cool.
Thank you, Mike.
You've worked so hard on it. Yeah, it's awesome.
Thank you. I love you. Thank you for having me here.
Of course. My pleasure. All right.
Okay,
I'll talk to you later.
Bye.